In this video, I'm going to reformulate the balance sheets of Nike and Starbucks. I've downloaded the financial statements off of the Edgar website and posted them to Blackboard in the class materials section for week 8. So you can pull those up and work alongside me. Or if you already feel like you're ready to jump into it, you don't have to watch this video. You can just simply reformulate the balance sheets of each company on your own and check your work to the solution that's also posted on Blackboard. If you want to download these financial statements on your own, remember you go to Google SEC Edgar Company search, put in Nike's ticker NKE, filing type is 10K, click on Interactive Data, and once you do, you see this icon for View Excel Document. You're going to click on that. Open it up, and you'll see a lot of the financial statement information in Excel format, all in different worksheets within this file. So here you see the income statement. If you scroll over a little bit, you see the balance sheet. But I'm going to work off of the one that I posted to Blackboard. I'm ready to start my reformulation, so the first thing I'm going to do is remove these unnecessary subtotals and headings. Total assets, I might just move down here to keep as a check figure, but I certainly don't need it in my reformulated balance sheet. These have no balances, so I can take them out, and I'll keep my shareholders' equity. I'll use that as a check figure at the end. Next, what I'm going to do is separate my financial assets and liabilities from my operating assets and liabilities. So I'm going to keep my operating assets here, group them all together, and these are indeed all operating assets. And next to that, right below that, I'm going to report my operating liabilities, which means I need to remove some of these financial liabilities or financial obligations. And these are operating liabilities here. Long-term debt is a financial obligation. Deferred income taxes and other liabilities, operating. Of course, on a quiz or an exam, you won't be doing this in Excel. You'll be given financial statement data, and you'll just have to choose to answer questions such as what are the operating assets, what are the operating liabilities, what are the net operating assets, and so forth. All right, so now we're ready to write down our net operating assets, NOA, equal to our operating assets minus operating liabilities. Next, I want to group together my financial assets and then finally my financial liabilities. Here are my financial assets or financial investments. And next I want my financial obligations or financial liabilities. And I want to put a total here of the net financial obligations. And if this is negative, it would be reported as net financial assets. Most companies typically will have financial obligations that are greater than their financial assets. So we're going to set this up as financial obligations less financial assets. And what do we see here? Well, clearly their financial assets were greater, so we're showing a negative obligation. And what is a negative obligation? It's an asset. And finally, we're going to show NOA less NFO equals common stockholders' equity. So if we take our NOA and subtract our NFO, or net financial obligations, which are negative, what are we doing when we're subtracting a negative? We're adding a positive. We're adding our net financial assets to our net operating assets, as expected. And this should be equal to our common stockholders' equity. If I scroll down, I can check my work. And I see total shareholders' equity, 12,407, 12,258. If I want to check my total assets number here, I'm going to look at the sum of my operating assets plus my financial assets. I see 11,630 and check that does not. Oh, yeah, I was looking at the average. Yep, the sum is 23,259, and I see that I have that total assets from their as reported balance sheet. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is do a similar analysis on Starbucks. Again, if you feel like this is straightforward, you want to skip the rest of this analysis, feel free. You can always do this on your own and check your work to the solution on Blackboard. Move my total assets down here just simply for a check figure. Get rid of all these unnecessary subtotals. And now start regrouping. Cash and equivalents, financial asset, short-term investments, financial asset. I'm going to move those over to the side and group together all of the operating assets. Long-term investments, financial asset. Equity and cost investments. Remember we said long-term or equity investments. Unless they say something about short-term, we consider these to be operational investments in the stock of other companies, but done with a strategic purpose. So we classify them as operating. The rest of these assets all look like operating. Put in our subtotal. And then we're going to put together our operating liabilities, just like we did with Nike. Accounts payable, accrued liabilities, insurance reserves, stored value card liability. I assume that's gift cards that have been unredeemed. These are all operating liabilities. Oh, I'm not finished yet though. Current portion of long-term debt and long-term debt. These are financial obligations. And I need to add just one more other long-term liabilities as operating liabilities. Next, I report my net operating assets, or NOA. Difference between operating assets less operating liabilities. Make some room to put in my financial assets. And then my financial obligations. Just 2 items here. And show a subtotal for net financial obligations. Start with the obligations and from that subtract out assets. Oops. I might fix these formulas here. Sorry about that. Okay, I see that I have left out, when I scroll up, I left out my cash and equivalents. Sorry about that. Probably spent the last minute or so wondering why I skipped that. Let me move that here, change my formulas. All right, now I have my net financial obligations, $699.4 and $180.3. So in this case, unlike Nike, which had net financial assets, more investments than it did have borrowings, we see Starbucks has more borrowings than it does excess cash invested, which is more typical to see this format. So do a check. Net operating assets minus our net financial obligations should give us common stockholders' equity, or total stockholders' equity. And let's check that these are the amounts for total stockholders' equity. Sure enough, I see here that the numbers agree. I can confirm my total assets by adding my operating assets plus my financial assets. See here the sum 14,365 agrees to the sum here for total assets 14,365. In the next video, I'm going to reformulate the income statement for both Nike and Starbucks.